Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tackling a subject that feels um, incredibly permanent.
Right.
It's one of those things that if I asked you to picture it, you'd probably picture something ancient. Stone ruins, timeless art, history that goes back to the Caesars.
Mhm.
We are talking about Italy.
It is deceptive, isn't it? It's kind of the ultimate historical optical illusion.
Yeah.
When you think of Italy, you think of the Colosseum, you think of the Renaissance, you think of the Vatican.
Yeah.
You assume the nation itself must be the bedrock of Western civilization.
Exactly. I mean, Rome is the eternal city. It feels like it's been the capital of Italy forever.
Right.
But if you look at a map from, say, 1850,
Which is not that long ago.
not at all. My great-great-grandfather was alive then. There is no Italy.
No, there isn't. There's a peninsula shaped like a boot. Sure, geography doesn't change. But politically, it was a ghost. It was just a fragmented collection of rival states, duchies, kingdoms.
And a lot of them were controlled by foreign powers.
Oh, yeah. Austria, Spain, France. They all had a piece of the pie.
So, the Italy we know today, the political reality of the Italian Republic, is actually younger than the United States. It's younger than the steam engine.
Significantly younger. We are looking at a unification process, the Risorgimento, that really only coalesced in 1861.
It wasn't even fully complete then.
Not at all. Geographically, not until 1870. And if you ask some historians, the project of making Italians went on well into the 20th century.
And that's our mission today. We're going to unpack this Risorgimento, which, let's start there. What does that word actually mean?
Literally, it means the resurgence, or rising again.
It's a very romantic, loaded term.
Oh, totally. It implies that the nation wasn't being created from scratch, but that there was this sleeping giant, this ancient soul of Rome, that just needed to be woken up.
It's a great marketing pitch. We aren't building something new. We're bringing back the glory.
Exactly. But as we dig into the sources, we're going to see that the reality was a lot messier than just waking up. It was a collision of ideologies, wars, backroom deals.
And honestly, the cast of characters here is unbelievable. I was reading through the background notes, and it reads like a screenplay.
It really does.
He's got a diplomat who's playing 4D chess, a general who looks like he walked out of an adventure novel, an idealist who keeps getting thrown in prison.
And a king who somehow manages to ride this tiger without getting eaten.
It really is a dramatic story. It involves secret societies, assassination plots, guerrilla warfare.
Oh, yeah.
And
Because it's Italy, a lot of opera.
of course. So we have a massive stack of historical records and encyclopedic accounts to get through. So let's dive right into the status quo. Let's go back to the board game. The year is 1815. Napoleon has just been defeated at Waterloo. The European powers meet at the Congress of Vienna. What does the map of Italy look like?
Well, to understand 1815, you have to understand what happened just before. Napoleon had swept through Italy, and for a brief moment, French rule just destroyed the old feudal structures.
Right.
They introduced modern laws, efficient administration, and they planted the seed of nationalism. They even created a Kingdom of Italy in the north,
Though it was a French puppet state.
the client state.
Yeah.
But still.
So they gave the Italians a taste of what it could be like. They showed them, hey, you don't have to be 20 different little countries.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
then Napoleon falls. The Congress of Vienna in 1815 hits the reset button. The European powers, Austria, Russia, Prussia, Britain, they want to turn back the clock.
They want to pretend the French Revolution never happened.
They restore the old absolute monarch
So they chop the boot back up.
ruthlessly, and they hand the pieces out to safe conservative rulers. Let's look at the map post-1815. In the north, you have the Kingdom of Lombardy, Venetia.
Okay, and this is the wealthy part of Italy.
Yeah, the industrializing part, Milan, Venice. And it is directly controlled by the Austrian Empire.
So German-speaking overlords running northern Italy, that's got to create some friction.
Immense friction. You have to imagine Milan was a sophisticated city, and yet the police were Austrian, the judges were Austrian, the censors were Austrian. You paid your taxes to Vienna. It was an occupation.
And Austria's influence didn't stop there. It kind of bled into the other states.
Oh, absolutely. The Austrian Chancellor Metternich, who is sort of the arch-villain of this story from the Italian perspective, he made sure that the neighboring states were run by Austrian puppets.
Like where?
The Duchy of Parma, the Duchy of Modena, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany. The rulers were all Habsburgs or Habsburg adjacent.
Metternich is the one who famously said, Italy is a geographical expression.
Right. He was completely dismissing it. He was saying Italy isn't a nation, it's just a label for a peninsula on a map. And he wanted to keep it that way.
Okay, so the north is effectively an Austrian parking lot. What about the middle?
The center is the Papal States. And this is a massive chunk of land cutting right across the peninsula from Rome all the way to Bologna. And it was ruled by the Pope.
And we aren't talking about a spiritual leader sitting in the Vatican giving sermons.
No, no, no. We are talking about a temporal king. The Pope had an army, he had police, he had tax collectors.
So it's a theocracy.
A full-on theocracy, and the administration was run almost entirely by the clergy.
And based on the sources, it wasn't exactly a well-run machine.
It was notoriously corrupt and inefficient. There were very few railways, heavy censorship, a really repressive police state. It was often described as the most backward government in Europe.
So if you're a liberal in the 1840s, this is your nightmare.
Absolute nightmare.
And the South?
The South is the kingdom of the two Sicilies. This covers Naples and the island of Sicily. And it was ruled by the Bourbon dynasty, specifically Ferdinand II and later Francis II.
The Bourbons. So that's a Spanish and French royal family, right?
Yes. So again, you have foreign influence. And the Bourbons ran a very conservative, absolutist regime.
I remember that quote from the British politician William Gladstone.
Oh, yeah, it's brutal. He visited Naples and famously described the government as the negation of God erected into a system of government.
That is a brutal review.
It was a harsh regime. The prisons were full of political dissidents. The poverty was staggering, especially compared to the industrializing North. It was essentially a feudal society that had survived into the 19th century.
So where was the hope? If you're an Italian patriot in 1820, where do you look for leadership? You're surrounded by Austrians, priests, and Bourbons.
You look to the northwest, the Kingdom of Sardinia.
Piedmont Savoy.
It's often called Piedmont Savoy. It included the island of Sardinia, but the power center was Turin in Piedmont, and it was ruled by the House of Savoy, an indigenous Italian royal line.
And that becomes the engine of unification.
Eventually, yes. They were the only state with an independent army and a foreign policy that wasn't dictated by Vienna. But in the early days, the resistance wasn't coming from kings, it was coming from the underground.
The secret societies. I love this part. This feels very Da Vinci Code.
It does a bit.
Tell me about the Carbonari.
The Carbonari, or charcoal burner.
Charcoal burners. Why that name?
It's likely a reference to their trade, or maybe a ritualistic symbol, burning the wood to create the fire of change,
Right.
or purifying society like charcoal purifies water.
Okay.
They were a secret network, very similar to Freemasons, but with a specific political goal: Italian nationalism and constitutional government.
And they were fiercely anti-tyranny.
Extremely. They popped up in the South first, but spread everywhere. They had secret handshakes, passwords, complex initiation rituals. They were the bogeyman for the Austrian police.
And they were pretty hardcore, right? I read in the notes that they were involved in assassination plots.
Oh, they were serious revolutionaries.
Yeah.
The most famous incident involving someone from this world, though he acted sort of independently, was the Orsini bomb plot in 1858.
Let's unpack that because it's a crazy story. Felice Orsini.
Felice Orsini was an Italian nationalist who decided that the biggest obstacle to Italian freedom wasn't necessarily Austria, but the inaction of France.
Okay, why France?
He believed Napoleon III, the Emperor of France, had betrayed the cause. Napoleon III had actually been a Carbonaro in his youth.
No way. So Orsini thought he was a sellout.
Exactly. So Orsini decides to assassinate him to trigger a revolution in France, which he hoped would spill over into Italy. It's a bit of a bank shot.
Yeah, that's a few steps.
He and his accomplices traveled to Paris. They designed these very sophisticated bombs filled with fulminate of mercury.
And they attacked the emperor.
Outside the Opera House in Paris, they threw 3 bombs at the emperor's carriage. The explosion was horrific. It killed 8 people and wounded over 140.
Wow.
The carriage was shredded.
But the emperor?
He survived, virtually unharmed.
That seems like a total failure. You kill bystanders, you fail to kill the target, and you get arrested.
It should have been a failure. But here is the twist, and it shows you how strange history can be. Orsini is sentenced to the guillotine. But from his prison cell, he writes a letter to Napoleon III.
He doesn't beg for his life.
No. He begs Napoleon to help Italy. He writes, "Sire, do not reject the prayer of a dying patriot. Free my country, and the blessings of 25 million people will follow you."
And Napoleon listens.
Napoleon III was a complex man. He was genuinely moved by the letter. He allowed it to be published in the papers.
Really?
Yes, and it seems to have guilt-tripped him, or at least politically motivated him, to finally put the Italian question at the top of his agenda.
That is wild. a terrorist attack that actually leads to a diplomatic breakthrough.
It set the stage for everything that followed.
So we have the map, which is a mess. We have the spark, which is this lingering memory of Napoleon and the tricolor flag.
Right, the green, white, and red.
The symbol of resistance.
It was banned. To wave it was a crime.
But for a revolution to work, you need leaders. And the source material highlights this cast of characters that fits almost perfect archetypes. You have the soul, the brain, the sword, and the king.
It really does feel scripted. Let's start with the soul, Giuseppe Mazzini.
Mazzini, the idealist.
Mazzini was a Genoese writer and political activist. He started as a carbonaro, but he found their rituals too silly and their lack of central direction frustrating.
So he strikes out on his own.
He does. While in prison, because he spent a lot of time in prison or exile, he formulated a new plan.
Young Italy.
La Giovine Italia. It was a political movement founded in 1831. His motto was God and people. Mazzini was a Republican. He didn't want a king of Italy. He wanted a unified, democratic republic with Rome as its capital.
He seems like the guy who keeps the flame alive when everything looks dark.
He was the intellectual engine. He believed unification was a divine duty. He wrote, he agitated, he organized insurrections.
Most of which failed.
Miserably, yeah. Most failed. He spent most of his life in exile in London, dressed in black as if in mourning for his divided country. But he kept the idea of Italy on the table. He made people believe that being Italian was a real thing, not just a geographical accident.
Okay, so that's the soul. Now we need the brain, the guy who actually gets things done. Count Cavour.
Camillo Benso, Count of Cavour, the Prime Minister of Piedmont, Sardinia. And he is, in a way, the polar opposite of Mazzini.
Mazzini is the romantic poet. Cavour is the CEO.
That's a great way to put it. Cavour was a modernizer. He traveled to Britain and France. He loved railways. He understood banking. He believed in free trade. He wanted Piedmont to be a modern European state.
Was he revolutionary?
Not really. He was a pragmatist, a classical liberal. He wasn't necessarily dreaming of a united Italy from the Alps to Sicily, at least not at first. His primary goal was expanding the power of Piedmont.
And kicking the Austrians out of the north.
I'm driving the Austrians out of northern Italy. He disliked republicanism. He wanted a constitutional monarchy.
And he realized something crucial, right? That Piedmont couldn't do it alone.
Correct. The lesson of 1848, which was a year of failed revolutions across Europe where Piedmont tried to fight Austria and lost badly, was that enthusiasm isn't enough.
Right.
The Piedmontese army was small. The Austrian army was massive and professional. Cavour knew that to beat Austria, he needed a big brother. He needed an ally. And he set his sights on France.
We'll get to his big diplomatic play in a second, but we have to introduce the third character, the sword, the action hero, Giuseppe Garibaldi.
Garibaldi is arguably the most famous man of the 19th century. He was a global celebrity. If there was Instagram back then, he would have had the most followers.
He's the guy on all the statues.
Yes. He was born in Nice, and that's a crucial detail. Nice was part of the Kingdom of Sardinia at the time. He was a sailor, joined Young Italy, was sentenced to death for a failed mutiny.
And he fled to South America.
Right, and that's where he gets the Hero of Two Worlds nickname.
Okay.
He spent over a decade in South America fighting in wars of independence in Brazil and Uruguay. That's where he learned guerrilla warfare. That's where he formed his Italian Legion and adopted the red shirts.
Which was an accident of logistics, right? Not some grand design.
Yeah. Pure accident. The government of Montevideo had a surplus of red woolen tunics intended for slaughterhouse workers.
For butchers.
Yeah. Garibaldi needed uniforms for his Italian Legion. He took the butcher shirts, and a fashion icon was born.
I love that. The iconic red shirt was just surplus butcher gear. And he even lived in New York for a while.
He did. After another failed revolution in Rome in 1849, he went into exile again. He lived in Staten Island, New York, around 1850.
What was he doing there?
He worked in a candle factory with the inventor Antonio Meucci. Can you imagine? The future liberator of Italy dipping candles in New York City.
It's wild. So you have the idealist, the diplomat, and the warrior. And finally, the king, Victor Emmanuel II.
The Padre della Patria, father of the fatherland. He succeeded his father, Charles Albert, after that disastrous defeat to the Austrians in 1849.
What was he like?
Victor Emmanuel was rougher. He liked hunting and women more than politics, perhaps, but he had a crucial quality. He was a symbol.
Why was he so important?
He was the only Italian monarch who maintained a constitution after 1848. the Statuto Albertino.
Every other ruler tore theirs up.
Exactly. They all went back to absolutism. Victor Emmanuel kept the parliament. That made Piedmont the sanctuary for every persecuted patriot in Italy. If you were an intellectual running from the Pope or the Austrians, you went to Turin.
So we have the pieces on the board. Now we need the action. Let's move to Section 3 of our outline, 1859 to 1860, the years where everything changes.
It all starts with Cavour's master plan. He needs to provoke Austria into a war so that France will come to Piedmont's aid.
Okay.
He makes a secret deal with Napoleon III at Plombières.
This is the real politic moment.
It is. The deal is, France helps Piedmont kick Austria out of Lombardy and Metz. In exchange, Piedmont gives France 2 territories, Savoy and Nice.
Trading land for help. That's gold. Cavour is giving away the cradle of the dynasty in Savoy.
And Garibaldi's hometown, Nice. It shows you how desperate he was to get rid of the Austrians. Cavour starts mobilizing troops near the Austrian border. He stages military maneuvers. He just drives the Austrians crazy until they finally issue an ultimatum.
Disarm or else?
And Cavour rejects it.
A trap is sprung.
It snaps shut. Austria invades. France jumps in. This is the Second War of Independence.
And it's not a skirmish. These are massive battles.
Huge. The battles of Magenta and Solferino. Solferino, in June 1859, involved 300,000 men. It was a bloodbath. The heat was intense. The carnage was awful.
This is where the Red Cross comes from, isn't it?
Yes. A Swiss businessman named Henri Dunant just happened to be there. He saw the aftermath, thousands of men dying in agony, crying for water, rotting in the sun. He was so traumatized, he organized local women to help and later founded the International Red Cross. That's the scale of the horror.
So they win. They push the Austrians back.
They win Lombardy, which is Milan. The road to Venice is open. But then Napoleon III gets cold feet. Well, the war is unpopular in France, the casualties are horrific, and Prussia is looking threatening on the Rhine.
So he just bails.
He ghosts him. Without telling Cavour, Napoleon III signs an armistice with Austria at Villafranca.
What does that mean for the deal?
It means Austria gives up Lombardy, but they get to keep Venice. Cavour is furious. He resigns in protest.
He comes back, though.
Oh, he comes back shortly. But the deal stands. Piedmont gets Lombardy. France gets Savoy and Nice.
And this must have driven Garibaldi crazy. Nice is his hometown.
Garibaldi was incandescent with rage. He felt Cavour had sold his birthplace to foreigners. This created a permanent rift between the sword and the brain.
So what does he do?
He wanted to go blow up the ballot boxes in Nice, but instead his attention was diverted south.
To the expedition of the 1,000. I'm Amel. This is the movie script moment.
It really is. May 1860, there are uprisings in Sicily against the Bourbon King Francis II. Garibaldi scrapes together a volunteer force, about 1,000 men.
What kind of men are we talking about?
Not professional soldiers. Students, doctors, artisans, lawyers, wearing red shirts, carrying bad muskets. They steal 2 steamships from the port of Genoa and sail for Sicily.
And they sail to Sicily to take on a kingdom that has an army of 150,000.
It sounds like a suicide mission.
Yeah.
Cavour actually thought it was. He didn't officially support it, but he didn't stop it either. He figured if Garibaldi failed, he could disavow him. If he succeeded, well, that's a different problem.
So they land at Marsala.
They land at Marsala on the west coast of Sicily. They march inland. At Calatafimi, they meet the Neapolitan army. It's an uphill battle. Garibaldi's men are outnumbered. His officers tell him to retreat.
And this is where he says that famous line.
Garibaldi famously replies, "Here we make Italy or we die."
Goosebumps.
They win. It's a shock victory, but it rallies the local Sicilian peasantry. They see Garibaldi as a liberator. The Bourbon army, suffering from poor leadership and low morale, just begins to collapse.
And he takes the capital, Palermo.
After fierce street fighting, yes.
And he doesn't stop at Sicily.
No. He crosses the strait to the mainland. He marches up the Boot. The resistance just melts away.
He takes Naples.
He enters Naples, the capital of the South, by train. He didn't even have to fight his way in. The king had fled. Garibaldi is greeted as a messiah.
So now Garibaldi is effectively the dictator of southern Italy. And this creates a massive problem for Cavour and the king of the north.
Real. Huge.
Yeah.
Because Garibaldi is a Republican at heart, influenced by Mazzini, and his slogan is Rome or death. He wants to march on Rome and take out the Pope.
And why is that a problem? Wouldn't taking Rome complete the set?
It would bring the French back in. France was the protector of the Pope. If Garibaldi attacked Rome, Napoleon III would send the French army to crush him.
And possibly crush Piedmont, too.
The whole unification project could unravel.
So Cavour has to act fast.
He has to outmaneuver Garibaldi. Cavour sends the Piedmontese army south, marching through the Papal States, carefully avoiding Rome itself but taking the eastern territories to intercept Garibaldi.
This is the showdown. The regular army meets the revolutionary hero. The meeting at Teano.
October 26, 1860. King Victor Emmanuel II rides out to meet Garibaldi near Teano. This is the moment of truth. Does Garibaldi fight the king to establish a republic? Or does he submit?
And
Garibaldi rides up, takes off his hat, and hails Victor Emmanuel as King of Italy.
just like that.
He says, "I obey." He hands over the South to the king.
That is surprisingly humble for a guy like him.
It's tragic and noble. Garibaldi sacrificed his political ideal, the Republic, for the sake of Italian unity. He asked for nothing in return, refused titles, rewards.
What did he do?
He packed a bag of seed corn and sailed back to his rocky island farm on Caprera.
What a legend. So effectively, Italy is made.
Effectively. On March 17, 1861, the Kingdom of Italy is officially proclaimed. Victor Emmanuel II is the king.
And Cavour.
Cavour dies just 3 months later. Exhaustion, fever, probably malaria. Talk about finishing the job just in time.
What were his last words?
Reportedly, Italy is made. All is safe.
But was it safe? Because Section 4 of our outline is titled The Aftermath and the Messy Reality. It sounds like the happily ever after wasn't so happy.
It was incredibly messy. You have to remember, this wasn't a federal merger of equals like the United States or Germany.
Yeah.
This was, legally and practically, an annexation by Piedmont.
Piedmontization.
Yes. They took the Piedmontese constitution, the Piedmontese tax system, the Piedmontese legal code, and they just pasted it over the entire peninsula.
And I imagine that didn't go over well in the South.
It was a disaster. The South was agricultural, poorer, with different traditions. Suddenly they were hit with high taxes and conscription laws they weren't used to.
And the North looked down on them.
Totally. With a colonial mindset. Northern politicians and generals often describe the South as corrupt, barbaric, or uncivilized.
The source material mentions they felt they were imposing Piedmontese morality on barbarians. That's harsh.
It led to a reaction. We call it brigandage, but that's a dismissive term used by the state. It was essentially a civil war in the South that lasted for years.
It's a civil war.
Local uprisings, loyalists to the Bourbons, angry peasants. Yeah.
How big was this conflict?
The new Italian state had to deploy 120,000 soldiers to the south to suppress it. That's half the army.
Half the army.
More people died in the brigandage wars than in all the wars of unification combined.
That is a staggering statistic that gets left out of the glorious narrative.
What's that?
And this created the Southern question, right? The question meridional.
Yes. The deep economic and social disparity between North and South that, frankly, Italy still wrestles with today. The North industrialized, the South stagnated.
And then there's the Roman question. We said they avoided Rome to keep the French happy. But the Pope must have been furious about losing most of his territory.
Furious is an understatement. Pope Pius IX went from being a potential reformer to a staunch reactionary.
And what happened when they finally did take Rome?
In 1870, the French had to leave to fight Prussia, which opened the door. The Italian army breached the walls of Rome, and the Pope retreated into the Vatican.
He called himself a prisoner.
He declared himself a prisoner in the Vatican. He issued the non-expedit decree, which forbade Catholics from voting or participating in the new Italian government.
Wow. Imagine trying to build a new nation where the vast majority of your citizens are told by their spiritual leader that the government is illegitimate.
It was a nightmare for stability. The rift between church and state wasn't fully healed until Mussolini signed the Lateran Treaty in 1929.
So, politically, it's a bit of a shotgun wedding. But what about culturally? Section 5 talks about culture and legacy. How did they try to glue these people together?
Well, one major glue was opera.
Of course, it's Italy.
But specifically Giuseppe Verdi. His music became the soundtrack of the Risorgimento, the chorus Va Pensiero from the opera Nabucco.
About the Hebrew slaves.
Right, about them longing for their homeland. It was adopted by Italians as a song about their own longing for freedom.
And there was that secret code, right? Viva Verdi.
It was brilliant graffiti. If you wrote Viva Verdi on a wall, the Austrian police couldn't arrest you for liking a composer, but everyone knew it was an acronym.
Vittorio Emanuele Re d'Italia. Victor Emmanuel, King of Italy.
Exactly. It was a viral meme before the internet.
And language. I know that dialects in Italy are still very strong today. What was it like back then?
In 1861, it's estimated that only about 2.5%, maybe up to 10% of the population actually spoke Italian, what we consider standard Italian.
So what was everyone else speaking?
Venetian, Neapolitan, Sicilian, Piedmontese, these were distinct languages, often mutually unintelligible.
So how did they fix that?
A lot of it is credited to Alessandro Manzoni and his novel The Betrothed.
I Promessi Sposi.
Right. He famously rinsed his clothes in the Arno, meaning he revised his novel into the Tuscan dialect of Florence, establishing it as the model for the national language, gave the new nation a literary voice.
But even with a king and a language, the map wasn't quite done, was it? We mentioned irredentism.
Right, unfinished business. Even after taking Rome in 1870, there were Italians living outside the borders, specifically in Trento, Trieste, Istria, and Dalmatia, which were still under Austrian rule.
And this desire to redeem those lands?
That is the root of irredentism, Italia irredenta, unredeemed Italy. This drive to complete the unification is what ultimately dragged Italy into World War I.
They saw it as the last step.
They viewed World War I as the fourth war of independence.
It's amazing how long that thread runs.
It shapes everything. It even shaped the rise of fascism, this idea of the mutilated victory after World War I when they didn't get all the land they wanted.
So we've gone from a fragmented map to a unified kingdom, but at a high cost. As we wrap up, how should we summarize this?
I think we have to view the Risorgimento as a masterclass in political complexity. It wasn't one thing. It was the high idealism of Mazzini, the ruthless pragmatism of Cavour, and the romantic heroism of Garibaldi.
We all needed each other.
None of them could have done it alone.
If Mazzini hadn't dreamed it, Cavour wouldn't have had a cause to manage. If Garibaldi hadn't fought, Cavour wouldn't have had the pressure to act.
Exactly. But it also teaches us a cautionary lesson. Drawing lines on a map is the easy part. Building a nation is hard.
That brings us to the famous quote by Massimo Vesalia.
Italy has been made. Now it remains to make Italians da fat. Questi sanno da fare gli italiani.
That is such a powerful line. It acknowledges that the political structure was just the shell. The soul still had to be constructed.
And in many ways, looking at the regional identities in Italy today, that process is still ongoing.
What a journey. From charcoal burners plotting in basements to the King of Italy entering Rome. Thank you for walking us through this incredible slice of history.
My pleasure.
And to our listener, here's a final thought to mull over. We tend to think of nations as inevitable, like, of course there's an Italy. But looking at this history, you realize how easily it could have gone differently. What if Garibaldi had lost in Sicily? What if Napoleon III hadn't signed that armistice? How many nations are out there right now, existing only in the minds of idealists like Mazzini, waiting for their Cavour or Garibaldi to make them real?
That is a fascinating question.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.
Arrivederci. I want you to picture something with me for a second.
Oh.
You're standing at a harbor, maybe it's Rotterdam or Shanghai, or even just a busy ferry terminal, and you look up, and just blocking out the sun is this wall of steel. It's a container ship, maybe a super tanker. It's essentially a skyscraper lying on its side.
It's a massive visualization.
It is massive. And you realize this thing weighs, 100,000 tons? Maybe even more. And it's carrying millions and millions of dollars of goods.
Right.
And then you look down at the water, and it's just sitting there. It's floating. And not only is it floating, but next week, it's going to go through a hurricane in the middle of the Pacific, get battered by 50-foot waves, and just keep going.
It really is one of those things that when you stop and actually think about it, it seems almost impossible. It's a staggering feat of engineering.
Exactly. I had this moment of just how do we build these things? Who decides that this specific shape will survive a storm? So I started digging, and I thought we were going to talk about shipbuilding, welding and sparks.
Physical stuff.
Yeah. But it turns out we're talking about something much more specific and honestly, much more intellectual. We are talking about naval architecture.
And I'm so glad we are making that distinction right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Because while they are absolutely related, they are definitely not the same thing.
Yeah, let's clear that up immediately. Because I think I probably use naval architect and shipbuilder interchangeably my whole life.
Oh, most people do.
Yeah.
But think of it this way. Naval architecture is the engineering discipline. It's the brain. It's the the whole design process.
Okay.
It pulls in mechanical engineering, electrical, electronic software, and crucially, safety engineering.
So the naval architect is the one staring at the blank page, or, the blank computer screen, figuring out if a thing will actually work in the first place.
Precisely. They are the architects in the truest sense of the word. Then you have shipbuilding.
Right.
That is the physical construction. That's the shipyard, the cutting of steel, the assembly, the launching, all of that.
So the brawn to the architect's brain, kind of.
In a way, yeah. And then to add one more layer, you have marine engineering.
Oh, another one.
And that's a distinct field, too, that focuses specifically on the shipboard systems, the engines, the pumps, the piping, the guts of the machine that makes it run.
Okay, so let me see if I have this right. The naval architect designs the vessel's shape and structure. The marine engineer designs the systems inside it, and the shipbuilder actually puts it all together.
That's a really good shorthand. But the naval architect's role is really the umbrella over all of it. Their mission is, it's holistic. They are designing these massive structures to survive and operate in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, the ocean.
And when we say operate, we are not just talking about a nice cruise on a sunny day.
Oh, no. No, we're talking about everything from massive supertankers and aircraft carriers to high-speed hydrofoils and offshore oil platforms. The scale is immense, and the stakes are just incredibly high.
And the scope of their work is pretty wild, too, right? It's not just, here are the blueprints, good luck with that.
Far from it. The source material really emphasizes that naval architecture covers the entire life cycle of the vessel.
The entire thing.
The entire thing. We are talking about basic research before a single line is even drawn. Then you get into preliminary design, detailed design, construction oversight, trials.
Wait, trials? Like test driving a car?
Exactly. Sea trials. But it continues on into operation, maintenance, and even dry docking. And here is a part people forget. Conversion.
Right, like if a ship needs a new job or something.
Exactly. You might take an old single-hull tanker and convert it into a floating production storage and offloading unit, for an oil field. Or you modify a ferry to carry more cars. The naval architect has to be there to run the calculations to make sure this new ship is still safe, still stable.
So it's really cradle to grave or cradle to scrapyard.
Cradle to scrapyard, exactly. And involved in all of that is the formulation of safety regulations and damage control rules. It's a massive responsibility.
Well, let's get into the actual science of it, because the mission, as you put it, is surviving the ocean. And step one of surviving the ocean is, well, don't sink.
The science of staying afloat.
This is what the experts call hydrostatics.
Correct. Hydrostatics deals with the conditions the vessel is subjected to while it is at rest, in still water.
Okay, so we haven't turned the engine on. We're just sitting there in the harbor. How does a hunk of steel weighing thousands and thousands of tons actually stay up?
It all comes back to a fundamental principle that, many of us learned in school, but perhaps haven't applied to a 100,000-ton vessel. And that's buoyancy.
The old Archimedes principle.
The very same. Yeah. The rule is absolute. The buoyancy force, that's the force pushing up, must equal the weight of the body.
Okay, let's break that down. Weight of the body. That's the ship, the cargo, the crew, the fuel.
Everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything. Gravity is pulling all of that mass down.
Right.
To stop it from going straight to the bottom of the ocean, you need an opposing force pushing up.
Yeah.
That is buoyancy. And the law states that the mass of the body equals the mass of the water displaced.
Displaced meaning pushed out of the way.
Exactly. So if your ship weighs 50,000 tons, you have to design a whole shape that, when you put it in the water, pushes aside exactly 50,000 tons of water. When you push that water away, the water pushes back. That's your upward force.
So it's a perfect balancing act. Gravity pulling down, water pushing up.
We call it equilibrium.
Which sounds very peaceful, very zen.
It sounds peaceful, doesn't it? But in naval architecture, equilibrium is a constant battle. You have gravity acting downwards through a single point, the center of gravity.
Okay.
And you have hydrostatic pressure buoyancy acting upwards through the center of buoyancy. For the body to remain at equilibrium, these forces must be of the same magnitude.
And here's the kicker mentioned in the notes. They have to be in the same line of motion.
That is the critical part. Absolutely critical. Imagine a vertical line. Gravity pushes down along that line. Buoyancy pushes up along that same line. The ship sits perfectly still.
But the ocean doesn't do still.
No, it does not.
Yeah.
And this leads us to the real complexity of ship motion. Because as soon as a wave hits, or the wind blows, or you drive a forklift to the other side of the deck,
those lines unalign.
They're no longer aligned. And the ship moves.
It moves, and understanding how it moves is probably the most important part of the job.
It really is.
This was a huge aha moment for me in the research. Because if you ask a regular person how a boat moves, they'd probably say it goes forward and it, rocks a bit.
Right.
But naval architects break it down into something called the 6 degrees of freedom.
It's the standard framework for analyzing motion in a fluid. Any floating body has 6 ways it can move. And we divide them into 2 categories: translation and rotation.
Okay, let's break these down because I think visualizing this really helps you understand why designing these things is so damn hard. Let's start with translation. This is moving along a line, right? No spinning.
Correct. Shifting position. The first one is surge.
Surge. That sounds like moving forward.
It is. It's movement along the longitudinal axis,
Yeah.
so fore and aft.
Yeah.
The ship speeding up, slowing down, or being pushed backward by a wave. That is surge.
Okay, got it. Next up.
Sway. This is transverse movement, side to side.
Like sliding sideways.
Exactly like sliding sideways. Imagine a giant hand pushing the ship from the side, and the whole vessel just slides laterally across the water without turning. That is sway.
Okay, and the third translation.
Heave. This is just vertical movement. The entire ship lifting straight up and then dropping straight down.
Okay, so surge is forward and back, sway is side to side, heave is up and down. Those are the slides.
Right.
Now we get to the rotations. This is the stuff that makes people seasick.
Indeed. These are movements around an axis. First you have yaw. This is spinning around a vertical axis. So imagine you are looking at the ship from a helicopter. If the nose of the ship twists to the left or right,
Yeah.
that is yaw.
So steering, when you turn the rudder.
Steering causes yaw, yes. But waves can also cause involuntary yaw, twisting the ship off its course.
Okay, what's next?
Pitch, or sometimes people call it trim. This is rotation about the transverse, or side-to-side axis.
So an axis running through the middle of the ship from port to starboard?
Exactly. So the ship rotates around that, the bow goes up, the stern goes down, then the bow slams down and the stern comes up.
That's the classic riding the waves motion, tipping forward and back.
That's the one. And finally, the most critical one for stability,
Roll.
or sometimes called heel.
Roll.
Rotation about the fore and aft axis, the ship tipping side to side.
Okay, so we have 6 different movements happening, potentially all at the same time. Surge, sway, heave, yaw, pitch, roll.
And that is where the danger lies, because
Yeah.
these movements interact in really complex ways. And this brings us back to that concept of stability. Stability isn't just sitting flat. It is the ability of the vessel to restore itself to an upright position after being inclined by wind or sea or shifting cargo.
It's the ability to bounce back.
Yes. If a gust of wind pushes the ship over into a roll, stability is the force that pushes it back up. If the ship doesn't have enough stability, it rolls over and it doesn't come back. That's a capsize.
There's a very specific, very technical danger mentioned in the source material that I want to unpack. It involves a relationship between 2 of those movements we just talked about, roll and heave.
Ah, yes. This is a fascinating and, frankly, terrifying phenomenon. It's all about resonance.
A resonance, like a singer hitting a note and shattering a wine glass.
Exactly the same principle. Every object has a natural period, a sort of timing at which it wants to vibrate or oscillate. Ships have a natural roll period.
The time it takes to rock left, then right, and then back to the center.
You got it. The source highlights a specific danger zone. If the period of oscillations in roll is 2 times that of the period of oscillations in heave, you have a serious problem.
Wait, let me get that straight. If the side-to-side rolling takes twice as long as the up and down heaving,
Yeah.
that's a disaster.
It can be. It creates a feedback loop that we call parametric rolling.
Right.
The energy from the ship just bobbing up and down on the waves, gets transferred into the roll. It starts to amplify the rolling motion.
So even if the waves aren't getting any bigger, the ship starts rolling more and more violently.
Exactly. It feeds on itself. And it can happen very, very quickly. The ship can start rolling to extreme angles, damaging cargo, tossing the crew around, or in the absolute worst case scenario, capsizing.
That is terrifying. It's like the ocean finds the ship's weak spot, its secret rhythm, and just uses it against it.
And the naval architect's job is to ensure that doesn't happen. They have to calculate the center of gravity and the longitudinal metacenter to basically tune the ship so that this resonance doesn't occur in typical sea conditions.
You mentioned the metacenter. That term popped up in the notes. It sounds super sci-fi. The longitudinal metacenter.
It sounds complex, but it's really just a point in space derived from the ship's geometry. It's a point that determines stability.
Okay, so how does it work?
Well, stability depends on the distance between the center of gravity, where the weight acts down, and this metacenter. The notes describe it as depending on the distance set equally apart from both the aft and forward section of the ship. Basically, it's the pivot point for the righting forces.
Uh-huh.
If your center of gravity is too high relative to the metacenter, you're top-heavy. You become unstable. You flip.
So you always want a really low center of gravity.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
But if it's too low, the ship becomes what we call stiff. It snaps back upright so fast and so violently that it's dangerous. It's a constant trade-off.
So we've got the ship floating. We've hopefully kept it from flipping over due to some rogue resonance. That's all hydrostatics.
Right.
But ships aren't meant to just sit there. They have to move.
And that brings us to our next big topic, the science of moving, or hydrodynamics.
Hydrostatics is water at rest. Hydrodynamics is water in motion.
Precisely. This covers the flow of water around the hull, the bow, the stern, and over bodies like propeller blades and rudders. It's all about how the ship and the water interact when there's movement.
So it's basically the study of resistance, right? The water doesn't want the ship to move through it.
It resists. You have friction of the water against the hull. You have the energy that's lost, just creating the waves that trail behind the ship. The naval architect has to design a shape that slips through the water with the least amount of resistance possible.
Because that dictates how big your engine has to be.
Resistance and propulsion are two sides of the same coin. Once you know the resistance at a certain speed, you can calculate the propulsion power needed to overcome it.
The source lists a few ways to move a ship. We're all familiar with propellers, obviously.
Propellers are still the standard, yeah. But you also have thrusters for maneuvering, especially for holding a position, and water jets for high-speed vessels.
And I saw that even sails are mentioned.
Yes, wind-assisted propulsion is making a comeback, actually, for efficiency. And of course, the power source varies. You've got internal combustion engines as the workhorses, but you have nuclear power for naval vessels and icebreakers. Solar is starting to emerge for smaller things.
And tied into all of that is controllability.
Maneuvering. It's not enough to just go fast in a straight line. You need to be able to turn, to stop, and to maintain position.
Like that dynamic positioning on those oil rigs, where
Yeah.
they just stay in one spot.
Exactly. Keeping a vessel perfectly still while waves and wind are trying to push it around requires this incredibly complex interaction between sensors, computers, and multiple thrusters. That is all hydrodynamics.
Okay, let's talk about the physical stuff. The bones of the ship. We've talked about all these invisible forces, but what is the ship actually made of?
This is the structural integrity part of the discipline, and it's a big one.
I was kind of surprised to see that despite all the carbon fiber and fancy materials we have today, the answer is still overwhelmingly steel.
Steel is still the king. It's strong, it's relatively cheap, and crucially, we understand it very, very well. For the hull of any major commercial vessel, it is almost always going to be steel.
The source does mention aluminum, though.
Right, but usually for the superstructure, the house part that sits above the main deck, it's lighter, so it helps keep that center of gravity down, which helps with stability.
And smaller boats might use glass-reinforced plastics, fiberglass.
For sure. But for the big beasts, it's steel plates. But here is the thing. You can't just weld a bunch of flat steel sheets together and hope it floats.
It would be floppy, right? Like a big baking sheet.
It would buckle under its own weight before it even hit the water. So they use a system of construction involving grillages.
Grillages! I love that word. It sounds like something you cook on in the summer.
You could visualize a waffle iron or just a grid.
Yeah.
You have the flat steel plate, but welded to it are stiffeners. You have ribs running one way and beams running the other way.
So the plate is supported on all four edges by these stiffeners.
Exactly. These rectangular panels, these grillages, are what make up the hull, the deck, and the bulkheads, which are the internal walls. It turns a floppy sheet of metal into an incredibly rigid structural component.
But even with these grillages, the ship faces a massive structural threat. The source calls it longitudinal bending.
This is the big one for long ships. Imagine the ship is a long beam, or like a ruler held between your hands. Now imagine a wave that is about the same length as this ship.
Okay.
If the crest of the wave is right in the middle of the ship, the bow and the stern are kind of hanging in the air, unsupported.
So gravity is pulling the ends down. The ship wants to frown.
We call that hogging. Now imagine the opposite. The trough of the wave is in the middle. So the bow is on one crest, the stern is on another crest. The middle is unsupported.
So the middle wants to sag down.
Exactly, sagging. These forces are immense. We are talking about tens of thousands of tons trying to bend and snap the ship in half over and over again.
This leads us to a really cool piece of engineering history that was mentioned in the outline, the Isherwood system.
Yes, This is a classic example of how engineering evolves to solve a huge problem.
So walk us through the evolution here. How did they used to keep ships from snapping?
Well, way back in the day, think of the SS Great Eastern in the 1800s. They used longitudinal stiffening. The main support beams ran the length of the ship from front to back.
That makes sense. I mean, if you don't want a ruler to snap, you reinforce it lengthwise.
It worked, but it was really difficult to build, very labor-intensive. So as the industry scaled up, they switched to transverse framing,
The ribs ran side to side?
like the ribs in your chest, yeah.
Hmm.
It was just easier to assemble. And for smaller ships, it was perfectly fine. But then in the early 20th century, oil tankers started getting bigger and longer, much longer.
And the transverse frames just couldn't handle the bending forces anymore.
They were struggling. The ships were getting really heavy and inefficient because you needed so much steel. And then along comes Sir Joseph Isherwood. He basically reintroduced the longitudinal system, but in a much smarter, more optimized way.
How so? What did he change?
He realized you didn't need those heavy longitudinal beams everywhere. You mostly needed them on the deck and on the bottom of the hull. The flanges of the beam, if you're thinking of the ship as an I-beam. That's where the stress is highest during hogging and sagging.
So he just stiffened the top and bottom with these long beams?
Yes, these strong longitudinal members. And because the deck and bottom were now so strong, he could space the heavy transverse ribs much, much further apart. The source mentions spacing them 3 to 4 meters apart.
That's a huge gap compared to the old way.
It is, but it worked. It kind of displaced the force that the bulkheads would have provided. It created a lighter, stronger ship that was easier to build. It completely revolutionized tanker design.
It's cool how sometimes the new innovation is just a smarter version of the old way.
Engineering is often cyclic like that. You find new ways to apply old principles.
Speaking of structure, there was one detail in the construction segment that I found absolutely fascinating. It was about crash science.
The crashworthiness of the vessel, yeah.
Right. When I think of safety in a collision, I usually think armor. Make it impenetrable. If another ship hits me, I want my ship to be a brick wall.
That is the intuitive thought.
Hmm.
But in physics, being a pure brick wall is often a really bad idea.
Why is that?
Because if two massive objects collide and neither of them gives at all, the energy has to go somewhere. It goes into shock. It creates instantaneous catastrophic failure. It could shatter the structure, break the keel, or rupture all the tanks at once.
Yeah, so what's the strategy then, if not a brick wall?
Elasticity. The source mentions that materials are chosen for their elastic properties.
You want the ship to be, what, squishy?
In a controlled way, yes. You want the structure to absorb the energy of the collision. You want it to deform, to dent, to crumple, but just locally.
Like the crumple zone on a car.
Exactly like that. But the goal, as it was stated in the source, is for the struck ship to absorb energy and deflect it, causing both ships to rebound.
Rebound. That's such a dynamic image. You actually want them to bounce off each other.
You want to convert that kinetic energy of the collision into deformation energy and then into potential energy that actually pushes the ships apart. It prevents the deep, penetrating damage that sinks ships.
So the naval architect is essentially engineering a skyscraper that is also designed to bounce if it gets hit.
That is the level of complexity we are dealing with. It's wild.
This feels like the perfect transition to our third segment. We've talked about the math, the physics, the steel, but the source material has this section titled Art versus Science.
This is my favorite part of the discipline because it acknowledges something very, very important. We haven't figured it all out yet. Not by a long shot.
It starts with the history. Traditionally, naval architecture wasn't a science at all. It was a craft.
It was. You didn't have computers or calculators. You didn't have fluid dynamics simulations. You had a master shipbuilder who would carve a half model out of a block of wood.
And how did they decide if the shape was any good?
By eye and by feel. They used subjective terms. They would look at the curves of the hull and say the shape was ungainly or full or fine.
Fine. That doesn't sound very scientific. Yeah, that whole shape looks fine to me.
It's funny, but in this context, fine meant something very specific. It meant the lines of the ship were fair.
Fair. That's the key word here, isn't it?
It is. A fair shape meant there were smooth transitions, no abrupt changes in curvature. It just looked, It looked like it would flow smoothly through the water.
And the crazy thing is, they were usually right.
The human eye is incredibly good at detecting geometric flow and fairness of a curve. Those fair shapes were often very efficient.
But now, of course, we have moved from craft to computation.
We have. We use CFD, that's computational fluid dynamics. We create digital twins of the ships in software. We use programs like Aveva, Trabon, or K3D. We can model the ship in a virtual ocean and see how it behaves.
So surely the art is dead then. We just let the computer figure it out.
You would think so. But the source makes a fascinating point. It says that the analytical tools for ships are actually less evolved than those for aircraft or spacecraft.
I stopped when I read that. I mean, we can fly a drone on Mars. We can land a rocket on a tiny barge in the middle of the ocean. But we can't perfectly model a boat. Why?
It comes down to the environment. The source cites the paucity of data on the marine environment.
Paucity meaning lack of.
A severe lack of. Think about space. It's a vacuum, it's empty, it's predictable. Think about the air, it's a fluid, but it's relatively light and fairly consistent. Now think about the ocean surface during a storm.
There's chaos.
Total chaos. You have wind. You have waves coming from different directions. You have currents. And the interaction between those random waves and the moving ship is incredibly fiendishly difficult to predict accurately.
So the input data, the sea itself, is the problem. We can't model it perfectly.
Exactly. Predicting the ship's response in a random sea is infinitely more complex than predicting drag in a wind tunnel. Because of that gap, that uncertainty in the data, the science can only take you so far.
So you still need the naval architect to step in and say, the computer says this is okay, but it doesn't look fair.
Exactly. The art of determining what is right still exists. That intuition, that experience, it fills the gap that the science hasn't closed yet.
That brings us to the role of the naval architect today. It's clearly not just some guys sketching lines on paper.
No, not at all. It is a cooperative effort. The naval architect is a team leader, an integrator.
The managerial challenge.
Yes. They are managing a team of specialists. You've got structural engineers, hydrodynamicists, interior designers, marine engineers, weapons systems engineers on a warship. And they have to integrate all of that into one coherent design.
And they are juggling these huge conflicting demands. The source lists 4 big ones: safe, economic, environmentally sound, and seaworthy.
And those are almost always in direct conflict with each other.
Give me an example of that conflict.
Okay, well, take safety versus economics. To make a ship safer, you might add more steel, more watertight bulkheads, more backup systems.
Which makes it heavier and more expensive to build.
Heavier means it burns more fuel to move. That hurts the economics. And burning more fuel hurts the environmental goal.
So you fix one thing and you kind of break 2 others.
Exactly. Or seaworthiness versus comfort. A ship that is very, very stable, which is good for safety, might be very stiff and snap back violently in waves. That makes the passengers sick and can break the cargo.
So the naval architect is the diplomat in the middle of all this.
They are the integrator. They have to find the optimal compromise that makes the product fit for purpose. They have to look at the owner, the regulators, and the ocean itself and find the one design that satisfies them all as best as possible.
And they're doing this for an absolutely incredible variety of vessels.
The diversity is stunning. Merchant ships, ferries, warships, submarines, hovercraft, giant offshore platforms.
It's everything that touches the water, really.
It is. And as we said right at the beginning, some of these are the largest movable objects that humans have ever built.
So let's bring it all together. We've gone deep on the physics, the history, the art. But for the listener who is just, commuting to work, why should they care about naval architecture?
I think it fundamentally changes your perspective on the world. I mean, we live on a blue planet. 70% of the surface is water. And almost everything you own, your car, your phone, your clothes, it almost certainly spent time on a ship.
And that ship didn't just happen.
No. It is the result of a massive intellectual effort. It is the integration of massive structural engineering with the wild fluid dynamics of an unpredictable ocean.
It's calculating the heave and the surge. It's trusting the grillages to hold together.
It's knowing that even when the waves are crashing and the wind is howling, someone, somewhere, ran the numbers to ensure that the buoyancy force would win against gravity every single time.
And I think I'll never look at a boat the same way without thinking about that art.
A fair shape.
Yeah. The idea that even with all our supercomputers and nuclear engines, there is still that human element, that ghost of the old shipbuilders looking at the hull and saying, yes, that is fair. That looks right.
It connects us to thousands of years of human history. It's a beautiful thought, really.
So the next time you see a ship on the horizon, don't just see a metal box. Think about the equilibrium, think about the elasticity, and think about the naval architect who had to be both an artist and a scientist to design it to survive the chaos.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It was a pleasure.
We'll see you on the next one. Okay, I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're driving a car. You're on a highway. It's late at night, pitch black, and your foot is just floored.
And when you say floored, we're not just, breaking the speed limit a little bit.
No, not at all. In this car, you are moving at 110 kilometers per second.
Wow.
That's about 68 miles per second. You could cross the entire Atlantic Ocean in, the time it takes to sneeze.
Which is a terrifying thought, but okay, go
So
on.
you're doing this impossible speed, and you look out the windshield. Way, way off in the distance, you see a pair of headlights. And they are not staying in their lane.
Oh.
They're coming straight for you. And the driver of that other car, they're also doing 68 miles per second.
So this is like the cosmic nightmare scenario.
It is. And for decades, this has been the story of our place in the universe. Those headlights, that's the Andromeda Galaxy. We are the Milky Way.
And for a long time, the astronomers, our cosmic traffic cops, have basically been telling us, brace yourselves.
Yeah. That crash, it's not an if, it's a when.
Right. The Andromeda Milky Way collision, it's probably the most famous future event in all of astronomy. The two heavyweights of our local group.
It's just smashing together.
A total demolition derby.
And we had a date circled on the calendar for it, didn't we?
We did. The general consensus was roughly 4.5 billion years from now. It was practically a settled fact.
But, and this is why we're doing this deep dive today, something huge happened last year.
That's right. A real paradigm shift.
We're recording this, for context, on January 29th, 2026.
Yeah.
And if you maybe missed the news out of mid-2025 because you were, I don't know, busy with everything else.
Which is understandable.
Let me fill you in. The entire narrative has changed. It turns out that cosmic car crash, it might actually be a near miss.
It's such a classic case of science correcting itself, as our vision gets sharper. We went from certain doom to, well, a literal coin flip.
So today, we are unpacking the whole Andromeda Milky Way collision story. We're going to look at the new science, that pivotal study from June 2025 that really changed everything.
And we'll get into how you even measure the speed of a galaxy that's millions of light years away, which is, a lot harder than just pointing a radar gun at it.
And we have to talk about what happens if we do crash, because I think we all have this Hollywood movie version in our heads, right? Explosions, planets cracking in half.
And the reality is, well, it's so much weirder.
Weirder how?
It involves ghosts, supermassive black holes, and just a mind-boggling amount of empty space.
And finally, of course, the big question, the fate of our solar system. Because it turns out, even if the galaxies miss each other, things are still going to get very, very hot for us here on Earth. So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I want to start with the before, before last year, before this new study. Just how sure were we that this collision was a done deal? Because in science, you almost never hear the word certain.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's almost always a game of probabilities. But if you rewind to around 2012, the confidence level on this was incredibly high. It was treated as fact.
And this was all based on Hubble data, right?
Exactly. Back in 2012, a team used the Hubble Space Telescope to measure the motion of stars inside Andromeda. And to really appreciate why things changed in 2025, you have to understand just how incredibly difficult that 2012 measurement actually was.
Okay, walk me through it. I get that we can tell if something is moving toward us pretty easily.
Right. That's the, let's call it the easy part. We use the Doppler effect. It's the same reason an ambulance siren sounds higher pitched when it's coming at you and lower when it's driving away.
Blue shift and red shift for light.
Precisely. If something's moving toward us, its light waves get kind of squashed together, shifted toward the blue end of the spectrum. And Andromeda is very, very blue in that sense. We've known for ages it's closing that gap at the 110 kilometers per second you mentioned.
So, okay, we know it's coming straight at us. Why isn't that enough to predict a crash?
Because of the sideways motion, what we call tangential velocity. Imagine you're standing on a baseball field. A pitcher throws a ball directly at your face.
I would prefer not to, but fine.
You can see the ball getting bigger as it approaches. That's the radial velocity, the blue shift. But if that ball is also moving just a tiny bit to the left, say an inch per second sideways, it's going to completely miss your nose and just whiz right past your ear.
Right, but from 60 feet away, that little bit of sideways movement is almost impossible to see.
Exactly. Now imagine the picture is 2.5 million light years away.
Okay, yeah, I see the problem now.
Trying to measure the sideways drift of Andromeda is like, it's like trying to spot a human hair growing on the moon from here on Earth. The precision required is just agonizing.
So how on earth did they do it in 2012?
They used Hubble to track the positions of a whole bunch of stars inside Andromeda, but they measured them relative to even more distant background galaxies.
Background galaxies.
Quasars, mostly. These things are billions of light years away. So for our purposes, they are completely frozen in place. They're like the fixed lighthouses on the distant horizon.
So they looked at Andromeda's stars and just checked if they were drifting left or right compared to those cosmic lighthouses.
Pretty much, yeah. They averaged the movement of thousands of stars over several years to get what they called sub-pixel accuracy.
Sub-pixel. That sounds intense.
It's the absolute limit of what was possible.
Mm.
And the finding back in 2012 was that Andromeda's sideways motion was tiny, almost negligible.
He's coming right for our nose.
Just straight down the middle. So the prediction was a full-on merger in about 4 to 5 billion years.
Okay, so that was the gospel for more than a decade, the Great Collision. Then June 2025 happens, till Sawala and his team publish a study, and boom, everyone's rewriting the textbooks. What did they find? Did they just prove Hubble was wrong?
Well, it's not that Hubble's data was wrong. The data was good. It's that the model they were using was, well, too simple.
Too simple. I mean, we're talking about the physics of entire galaxies. How simple can it be?
Well, the 2012 calculations were essentially what we call a two-body problem. They were just looking at the Milky Way and Andromeda as if they were the only two important things in the universe.
Like 2 billiard balls on a totally empty pool table.
Exactly. But the pool table isn't empty. Far from it. We live in a place called the local group, which is a whole cluster of galaxies. And we have some pretty significant neighbors.
And who are the main players here?
The two big disruptors in the math are the Triangulum Galaxy, that's also known as M33, and the Large Magellanic Cloud.
I've definitely heard of the Magellanic Cloud. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you can just see it in the sky, right?
Yeah, it looks like a sort of detached, cloudy piece of the Milky Way. It's a satellite galaxy of ours, but it's massive, has a lot of gravitational pull. And Triangulum is the third biggest galaxy in our whole local group.
Triangulum. It sounds like a secret society that runs the universe.
It kind of does.
Yeah.
But in this story, it's really just a gravitational bully. What Sawala's team did was use new, incredibly precise data from the Gaia spacecraft combined with Hubble's, and they finally accounted for the mass and gravity of these neighbors.
So they added the other players into the simulation.
They moved from a two-body problem to an n-body problem. And in physics, n-body problems are famous for one thing: chaos.
As in, like, mathematical chaos.
Exactly. Extreme sensitivity to the starting conditions. The Large Magellanic Cloud and Triangulum are constantly tugging on both the Milky Way and Andromeda. They're warping space-time. They're pulling on the trajectories.
If we go back to the baseball analogy, it's like a sudden gust of wind catches the ball mid-flight.
Or like there's a giant magnet buried in the pitcher's mound that just curves the path slightly.
Mm-hmm.
When Sawala and his team ran these new, much more complex simulations with all that extra gravity factored in, that straight line head-on collision just, it disappeared.
And what was left?
A coin flick.
A literal 50-50.
Almost exactly. The new statistics show there's now about a 50% chance that no collision will happen at all within the next 10 billion years.
That is just, it's wild. We went from this is absolutely happening to maybe, maybe not.
It really is a perfect example of that uncertainty principle in cosmology. We're dealing with such immense scales that one missing variable, like the gravitational pull of the Large Magellanic Cloud, can swing the entire prediction from certain doom to we might be okay.
So there's a real chance we might just wave hello as Andromeda sails by.
A cosmic drive-by, yes. It would still be gravitationally interesting. It'd be close, but not a merger.
That's a huge relief. But, you know, I have to be the one to ask the fun question now. Let's look at the other 50%. Let's say the coin lands on collision.
It's a crash.
A crash. Because when I hear galactic collision, my brain just pictures absolute, total carnage, stars smashing into stars, planets getting knocked around like billiard balls.
And that's a very natural image to conjure up. But it brings us to what I like to call the empty space paradox.
Okay, what's that?
That a galactic collision is actually more of a ghost through.
A ghost through. What does that mean?
It means that if these two galaxies collide, the probability of even a single pair of stars, just two stars, physically hitting each other is practically zero.
Wait a minute. You have to back that up. Andromeda has, what, a trillion stars? We have 300 billion? You smash a trillion things into 300 billion things and nothing hits.
It's extremely unlikely, yes. And it all comes down to scale. Our brains are just not wired to understand how incredibly empty space actually is.
Give me an analogy. Help me visualize it.
Okay, let's use the one from the source material because it really nails the scale perfectly. I want you to imagine that our sun is a single ping pong ball.
Okay, got it. One ping pong ball.
Now, where do you think the nearest star, Proxima Centauri, would be on that scale? If the sun is a ping pong ball right here, is Proxima Centauri across the room, maybe across town?
I feel like this is a trick question, so I'm going to guess. A few hundred miles away?
If the sun is a ping pong ball sitting in London, then Proxima Centauri is a single P in Berlin.
What? No way.
Yes, that's about 1,100 kilometers or 680 miles.
So you have one ping pong ball and then absolutely nothing for almost 700 miles, and then you find one P.
That's it. The average distance between stars in our galaxy is about 160 billion kilometers.
So it's basically just empty space.
Mostly empty space. So a galactic collision is like taking two giant swarms of ping pong balls, where each ball is hundreds of miles from its neighbor, and just passing them through each other.
They just fly right through the gaps.
They fly through the gaps, the galaxies pass through each other like ghosts, the overall structures merge, and the orbits of stars get all scrambled up. But the physical objects, the stars themselves, they almost never touch.
That is fascinating, but I have to admit it's also a little disappointing. I was really expecting some fireworks.
Oh, don't worry. There will be fireworks.
Yeah.
Just not from the stars.
Okay, so if the stars don't collide, what does? The gas.
Galaxies aren't just stars and planets. They are filled with these massive sprawling clouds of hydrogen gas. We call it the interstellar medium. And unlike stars, which are basically tiny points, these gas clouds are huge and diffuse.
So they can't possibly miss each other.
They can't. When the galaxies start to merge, these gas clouds will slam into each other at supersonic speeds. It creates these enormous shock waves. The gas gets compressed. And what happens when you compress huge amounts of hydrogen gas?
You get new stars.
You get millions and millions of them. We call it a starburst event. The collision would trigger this incredibly furious era of star formation. The sky wouldn't be dark. It would be ablaze with brilliant, hot, blue, newborn stars.
And supernovae going off like popcorn.
Exactly. It would be the single most spectacular light show in the history of the local group.
So the stars don't actually crash, but the cosmic nursery explodes with new life.
That's a great way to put it. But there is a much darker side to this merger. We have to talk about the monsters lurking in the centers of these galaxies.
You mean the black holes?
The supermassive black holes.
Right. We have Sagittarius A star at the center of the Milky Way.
Which is something like 4 million times the mass of our sun.
And what about Andromeda?
Andromeda has a much bigger beast in its core. We're talking somewhere between 100 to 200 million solar masses.
So our black hole is a Chihuahua, and theirs is a giant Rottweiler.
A very large Rottweiler, yes. And unlike the stars, these two black holes will find each other.
How, though? If all the stars miss, how do the black holes manage to meet up?
It's a process called dynamical friction.
Okay, unpack that for me. Friction in empty space.
It's a great name for it. Think of the black hole as a really heavy bowling ball moving through a sea of marbles, the stars. As the black hole moves, its gravity tugs on the stars, pulling them towards it. It kind of slingshots them, giving them a kick of extra speed.
Okay, so the stars get faster?
But energy has to be conserved, right? So if stars gain all that kinetic energy, the black hole must lose it. It slows down. It loses its orbital momentum.
And so it sinks?
It sinks. Down towards the new center of mass. Both black holes will do this, spiraling inward, closer and closer in this kind of gravitational dance. And when they get to within about 1 light year of each other, that's when reality itself starts to break down.
Gravitational waves.
Massive ones, rippling the very fabric of space-time. And eventually, after losing all that energy, they merge.
And what happens when a 4 million solar mass black hole gets eaten by a 100 million solar mass black hole?
You get a quasar, or what's called an active galactic nucleus.
In plain English.
A cosmic blowtorch. The merger and all the gas that gets funneled down toward it during the chaos, it releases an absolutely ungodly amount of energy. The light from it could outshine the entire rest of the galaxy combined.
So the center of this new galaxy basically becomes a death zone of high-energy radiation.
For a while, yes. It could release as much energy as 100 million supernova explosions.
100 million, that's a number that my brain just can't really process.
It's basically a beacon that screams, "We are here," to the entire observable universe.
Okay, so we've got ghost stars passing through each other, we have exploding gas nurseries creating new stars, and we have a central quasar that melts everything nearby. This leads to the most important question of all, really. Where are we in all of this mess?
The fate of the solar system.
Exactly. Do we get a front row seat? Do we get crushed or incinerated?
Well, the good news is we almost certainly don't get crushed. The whole ping pong ball rule applies to us too. No star is going to get close enough to hit the sun.
Okay, that's good.
But our cosmic address is definitely going to change. There was a study, I think it was back in 2007, from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center that ran simulations on this.
And what did they find?
It's orbital chaos, basically. There's about a 50% chance that during the merger, our solar system gets flung way out into the galactic suburbs. We could end up 3 times farther from the core than we are now.
So we retire to the country.
It'll be a lot darker, much quieter, fewer stars in the night sky. But there's another possibility, a 12% chance.
And what happens in that 12% timeline?
We get ejected.
Ejected, you mean? Like kicked out of the galaxy entirely?
Thrown out completely. We'd become a rogue solar system cast adrift in the vast, empty intergalactic void.
Just floating, alone, in the dark.
All alone. Over millions of years, the new galaxy would shrink until it's just a faint smudge of light. Eventually, the night sky from Earth would be perfectly, terrifyingly black. No stars, just our sibling planets.
That is a profoundly lonely image.
It is, but, and this is the amazing part, it wouldn't actually harm the solar system itself.
The Earth just keeps orbiting the sun.
Just fine. The gravity binding Earth to the sun is incredibly strong and very local. The huge, tidal galactic forces that scramble the star's orbits, they just aren't strong enough to rip our solar system apart. We'd be a lonely little system, but we'd be intact.
So, in theory, if humans or whatever we evolve into are still around, we could actually survive being ejected.
Physically, yes, you could survive.
So I'm picturing this future civilization, right? They're standing on Earth 4.5 billion years from now. They look up. They see Andromeda getting bigger and bigger in the sky. They see the collision, the starburst. It must be the greatest show in history.
It absolutely would be. But I have to be the bearer of some bad news here.
Oh no, what now?
No one is going to see it.
Why not? Because we'll have gone extinct.
Not just us, the entire planet will be uninhabitable. And the crazy thing is, it has absolutely nothing to do with the collision. Andromeda is completely innocent in this part of the story.
So who's the culprit?
Our own star. The sun.
But I thought the sun was stable for billions of years.
It's stable, yes, but it's constantly evolving. The sun is fusing hydrogen into helium in its core. That's what makes it shine. But as that helium ash builds up, the core gets denser. And because it gets denser, it has to get hotter to maintain equilibrium.
And a hotter core means the sun burns brighter.
Exactly. The sun's luminosity is actually increasing by about 10% every billion years.
10% doesn't sound like a planet killer.
Oh, it is when you're this close. In about 500 million to 1.5 billion years, so long before Andromeda gets here, that slow increase will be enough to trigger a runaway greenhouse effect on Earth.
You mean like what happened on Venus?
Exactly like Venus, but starting from a much nicer place. The oceans will begin to evaporate. And because water vapor is a powerful greenhouse gas, that traps more heat, which causes more evaporation. It's a vicious feedback loop.
And the end result?
The oceans boil away completely. The atmosphere becomes this thick, choking blanket of superheated steam. Surface temperatures will be hundreds of degrees.
So all life on Earth?
Gone. Sterilized. Wiped out.
That is such a sobering reality check. We're all sitting here worrying about this galactic car crash 4 billion years away, but our own engine is going to overheat and cook us in just 1 billion.
It really does put everything in perspective, doesn't it? Unless our distant descendants figure out some kind of incredible planetary engineering like physically moving the Earth farther away from the sun, the Great Collision will happen to an empty dead rock.
Wow. Okay, well that's depressing. But let's zoom out again. Let's assume some civilization is watching this whole thing. Maybe from Titan or a different star system.
Yeah.
After the chaos settles down, what's left?
The aftermath. We get a brand new single galaxy.
And it has a name, doesn't it? A nickname.
It does. Milkomeda.
Milkomeda.
Or some people prefer Milkdromeda.
I gotta be honest, I hate both of them. Milkomeda sounds like a new type of candy bar. Milkdromeda sounds like a medical condition.
Astronomers are not always poets, that's for sure. But Whatever we call it, the shape of Milkomeda will be completely different from what we know today.
Because right now, the Milky Way and Andromeda are both these beautiful spiral galaxies. They have flat disks, those graceful arms.
But spiral structures are incredibly fragile. When you smash two of them together, the gravitational chaos completely randomizes all the star orbits. You destroy the disk, you erase the arms.
What do you get instead?
A blob.
A blob.
Well, technically, it's a giant elliptical galaxy. Instead of a flat pancake, it's shaped more like a football or a sphere. It's just a giant, disorganized swarm of stars buzzing around the center in every which direction.
So no more Milky Way bands stretching across our night sky, just a sort of general glow.
Probably a reddish glow, actually.
Oh.
Elliptical galaxies are usually full of older, redder stars because all that gas got used up in that big starburst light show we talked about.
So Milkomeda will be a giant, red, fuzzy football floating in space.
With a supermassive black hole for a heart.
And what about our third wheel, the Triangulum Galaxy, M33? We said it messed up the collision math, but what actually happens to it during all this?
Yeah, M33 is the little sibling trying to tag along. The simulations on its fate are all over the place. Some show it orbiting the new Milkomeda for a few billion years before it finally gets pulled in and merges too.
A delayed snack for the new giant.
Others suggest it might actually hit the Milky Way before Andromeda even gets here. Or, in all the chaos, it might just get slingshotted out of the local group entirely.
It really seems like the ultimate destiny of our local group is just consolidation.
That's the long-term trend. Gravity is relentless. Over the next 100 or 150 billion years, all the major galaxies in our group will likely coalesce into this single massive object.
One giant island in the universe.
And that leads to a really strange thought about the very, very far future.
Go on.
You know about dark energy, right?
The force that's pushing the universe apart, making it expand faster and faster.
Right, so it's making the space between galaxy groups expand. Eventually, all the other galaxies outside our local group will be receding from us faster than the speed of light.
Which means their light can never reach us. They'll disappear from view.
Completely. So imagine a civilization born on a planet inside Milkomeda, say 150 billion years from now. They invent telescopes. They look up, they'll see all the stars in their own galaxy. But if they look deep into intergalactic space, they will see nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Because everything else will have been pushed over the cosmic horizon.
Exactly. They would logically conclude that Milkomeda is the entire universe. They would have no evidence that other galaxies ever existed.
Wow. We are living in a really privileged time, aren't we?
We are living in the golden age of cosmology. We can still see the neighbors. We can measure the expansion. We can reconstruct the history of the Big Bang. In the far, far future, that history will be erased from the sky.
That's heavy, but also kind of beautiful.
It is.
So let's bring this all back home. Back to today, to January 2026. What's a big takeaway for someone listening to this right now?
I think the takeaway is that science is a living, breathing process.
What do you mean?
Well, back in 2012, we had what felt like a certainty. The crash is coming. Then in 2025, we got better data, better tools, and we realized the universe is a bit more complicated. And that certainty became a probability.
The coin flip.
The coin flip. It's a great reminder that even when we think we have the future all mapped out, one missing variable, like the gravitational pull of a nearby galaxy, can change absolutely everything.
And even if the coin lands on Collide, it's not death. It's transformation. It's this ghostly dance that ends up creating billions of new stars.
That's a lovely way to see it, yeah.
So here's my final thought for everyone listening. Tonight, if it's a clear night, go outside. If you can get away from the city lights, try to find Andromeda.
It's just a faint, fuzzy patch in the constellation Andromeda. You might need binoculars, but you can find it.
Find that little smudge. And just take a moment to realize that the light hitting your eye left that galaxy 2.5 million years ago. That was before modern humans even existed on this planet.
And as you look at it, remember that it's either rushing toward us for a hug, or maybe it's just rushing past to wave hello.
And thanks to the Triangulum Galaxy, it might just be a friendly wave.
Let's hope for the wave.
Yeah.
It would make for a much quieter neighborhood.
Indeed. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive into our galactic future. We hope you feel a little more informed about our impending, or perhaps not so impending, cosmic fate.
And as always, keep looking up.
We'll see you next time.